Get Ripple, the bright new drink with that ring-a-ding flavor. Ripple.
Welcome.
Hi. Welcome
Hi.
to the Ripple Podcast.
I'm Angela.
I'm Rosa, and this is part 2.
This is part 2. Do you have anything to tell me before we start part 2?
Well, it has nothing to do with part 2. First of all, I will say that I was so good and didn't look up anything
Oh, good.
about your story. I was so tempted to, because I hate being left hanging like that.
Yeah.
And I didn't look up any of it.
You know what? You would have, I don't know. Okay. So this is such a crazy story that I feel like it should be way more well known than it is. But honestly, like majority of it is from one source.
Oh,
So-
interesting. Well, I did see pictures because I put some on like Instagram for the Ripple Podcast,
Oh, okay.
but I didn't read the stories or anything.
Okay.
So, to go along with that, I did, like, I don't know how your phone or whatever is set up, but every so often I get sent news stories that may be of interest to me.
Oh, because your phone's listening to you all the time.
All the time. It's listening to
Right
every
now.
word I say. And earlier today I got sent a story about a 21-year-old mom who was on a Zoom call for work, and she was shot. And
While she was on the Zoom call
Mhm.
in her house,
in her own home.
she was shot.
So all of the people on the Zoom call with her witnessed it happen.
What?
Horrible, horrible story. Turns out her toddler shot her in the head. And
Like intentionally?
I don't
Wait,
think
I don't know how
so.
toddlers work. Do toddlers know what that means?
I mean,
I don't know how kids are.
kids, as much as people say like, oh, my kid will never play with guns, or we don't have guns in our house, or however anti-gun a person may be, I'm sorry, but your kid is going to go and make a gun out of a
Pop-Tart?
Pop-Tart and get expelled from school. Yeah, the guns are just something that kids do. Boys, girls, everything, whatever. So,
Wait, I'm confused. Guns are something that kids do.
like play, like
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
Guns
Sure.
are like a whatever. So this toddler, that is the part that is very interesting to me. First of all, how did this toddler get a loaded handgun?
Yeah.
And then know how to correctly like pull back the
Hammer.
and
Well, it probably
release the
depends
trigger.
on what kind of gun it was, because it might not have had a hammer. I mean, it all depends. If they have something that's loaded and ready to go, it might be as simple as taking the safety off, and they may not have even had the safety on. Who knows?
Well, and that the kid shot once and got their mom in the head is, that's,
So he wasn't like, he didn't walk up to her and shoot her. He was somewhere across the room somehow.
According to this very vague story, the people on the Zoom call had seen the toddler walking back and forth, but no one necessarily in this story at least said that the kid had a gun. And what's a little suspicious, and maybe because I read too much true crime stuff, the boyfriend came home shortly after and walked into the room and saw the girlfriend on the floor. And there was the 911 call from the boyfriend that I listened to.
You think he did it?
I really hope not, because, I don't know what I hope. But this poor little girl, the toddler, is going to, if in fact she is the one that killed her mom, she's going to live with that forever. That's terrible to have that.
Yeah.
But the mom died. The 21-year-old is dead because of this gunshot. But the boyfriend called 911. People on the Zoom call called 911. And I listened, and I don't normally do that, but that's that sick,
I do.
twisted thing in my head that I have to know more. And it was intense. And he remained pretty calm on the phone call. He was giving her CPR. The dispatcher was, walking him through it. You could hear the sirens pull up in the background. It was pretty intense.
Wow.
And
That's
you do
really
hear
sad.
the little kid in the background here and there. Not you can't really tell what they're saying
Yikes.
or whatever. But the boyfriend's like, "There's blood everywhere. I just got home. I just walked in.
I
and
wonder
there's
how much
blood
time
everywhere."
had passed between the gunshot and him getting home.
Not a lot. Hardly anything, because paramedics hadn't even arrived yet.
Oh, yeah.
And the Zoom call people had already called paramedics, and they tell him that. They're like, "Okay, well, we already have people on the way. Someone else has already called this in."
That's crazy.
But it's just a little
too convenient.
Suspicious that he got home so shortly after she was shot.
Huh.
And that the range...
And like what you were saying, there was only one shot and it so just perfectly hit her.
Mm-hmm.
Huh. Interesting. I don't know. I mean...
Terrible story. Very sad.
Yeah. Lock up your guns. It's not hard. And they're still super accessible, like if you want to use them for home protection.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't have kids. I am a big supporter of the Second Amendment, if you want to get political on here. But you can I still have everything locked up. And when I need it, I can easily get to it, like in a matter of seconds. So I don't know.
Well, I do have a kid and we do have guns, but they are all very safely, again, locked up.
Yeah. Oh, that's sad.
Terrible.
Well, cheers.
Can you tell me what I'm drinking?
So this week you're drinking a different version of a hurricane, a much more drinkable version of a hurricane. It is...
Yeah, almost too drinkable because mine's almost gone.
I know. And mine's almost gone and we haven't even really started the story yet. So I'm going to slow down. Maybe. But it is Paradise Blend juice. So that has the passion fruit that I talked about last week. Orange juice. I mean, okay. I looked up so many recipes for this drink and it's literally add rum to fruit juice. And pick your version of tropical mixtures and go for it. But everything seemed to have lemon or lime or both. Obviously rum, and then like orange juice or passion fruit juice. And we've got a little mix of everything going on. We've got some pineapple juice in it. And it's really tasty. It's a really good end of the summer cool off drink because it's been really hot today.
It's so hot. It is ridiculously hot. Mm-hmm. Like humid. As I look at the temperature. It's 73 degrees. Sorry, people that are like actually in hot areas.
Well, let's talk about some people who were actually in a much hotter area.
Whoa, look at that segue.
Every time I see or hear the word Segway, I still think of those. Do you remember Segways?
Oh, those people on
those little rolling hoverboard type things.
Was that Paul Blart?
I don't know who that is. Oh yeah. I don't mean.
Didn't he ride around on a Segway?
Yeah, but they used to have them all the time at the harbor. People doing Segway tours.
Oh, that's so dumb.
Funny. Okay, so yeah, we're going back to Memorial Hospital in New Orleans after Hurricane Katrina. And if you haven't listened to part 1, go listen to part 1 because we're picking up right where I left off. And just a little reminder, it is super hot there. It's going into the hundreds, high 90s.
Yeah, do a quick little recap for us.
Yeah, so multiple people had passed away. They just couldn't survive without the help of electronic machinery, life-saving. They don't have power anymore. Power is off. They also don't have clean water anymore, or running water. The toilets don't work anymore. So
because all the levees broke.
Right. So there is sewage backing up in the bathrooms. It's hot. It is humid. It is smelly. Nobody can take a shower. They've been there for a few days now. And then I left off around the time where they were being rescued very slowly, but then they had news of people shooting at the rescuers because the whole town has kind of gone crazy and people are looting, people are shooting. It's dangerous out there. So hospital workers who had guns were standing guard to make sure that nobody tried to loot the hospital. So now we're going back to the third day of being stranded in this hospital after Hurricane Katrina hit.
It seems like so much has happened in just 3 days.
Oh, yeah. Like the entire world has turned upside down for these people. Things that were normal, like say you got up in the morning and you had a cup of coffee and grabbed yourself a beignet or whatever, because I just really want beignets right now.
I was just going to say, that sounds so amazing. And why did you say beignet? Like, why not bagel or donut or
because
piece
they're
of toast?
in New Orleans.
I know. That's fantastic.
But yeah, like just simple things that you just rely on, even though they're such luxuries, like all of that is gone. They're like in a third world country at this point.
Seriously. That's
So
insane.
This morning, Dr. Poe and 2 nurses had decided to put as many of the 100-ish I think they were at like 123 or something patients still there. So they were going to, go ahead.
Do you know how many staff are on approximately?
No, because I mean, there's so much going on. I don't even know if they knew, because some of the staff did leave with patients. And then there's other like little side stories of staff leaving on boats to go help find their families.
Oh, of course.
Yeah. So there's a lot going on.
Okay.
But I mean, they have staff there. They still have doctors. They still have nurses. And there's a few that are a little bit more notable for this story. But yeah, I don't know the exact numbers at this point.
I was just curious.
Yeah, so they have over 100 patients still left. They're trying to get as many possible on the same floor. And that way, like kind of everybody can keep an eye on everybody, because you have to remember these people haven't been able to take a break at all. They've been going nonstop. So they want to put it kind of like in shifts and create this triage type situation. So they tried to get as many as they could, but some of these patients were bed bound and they couldn't be moved safely because remember, they don't have the elevators anymore. So everybody is who can't walk has to be carried up and down these floors, and it's an 8-story building. So then they decide to divide them into groups to help speed up the evacuation once evacuation is resumed. And they categorize the people based on the condition, and then they pin numbers to their gowns. So
what do the numbers mean?
well, I'll tell you right now. The 1s had first priority, and these were patients that were in good health and could sit up and walk on their own. The 2s...
First priority for evacuation. Why would they have those people evacuated first? Why would not the people that are in most need of care?
I wondered that too, but I think it's because they were worried. I mean, I'm just assuming that it was more dangerous for the people who are in a worse condition to be moved in that way. So maybe if they got to a point where they could restore power, or maybe they got to a point where an ambulance could come pick them up, that might be a safer way for them to evacuate. But that's just my assumption.
So number 1s could probably help evacuate themselves a little bit more.
Yes.
Okay. Got it.
And
okay.
I don't know.
That
I had the
sense.
same question you did.
That makes sense.
So the 2s, they were a little bit worse off and they needed more assistance to be moved. And then there's the 3s, and those were the people who were really sick. A lot of them were bed bound. And then those were also the patients who had DNRs. So there was 9 patients that couldn't be moved to that floor. They were on higher floors. And of those patients, they were all considered 3s because they couldn't be moved.
Okay, I'm stopping you mid-sentence. Do you have a new tattoo?
I do. Yeah.
When did that happen?
That happened today.
From where?
Oh, I thought I told you about this. I was going to give you a little update, but then I got sidetracked. So today I went to downtown Ventura to Black Penny. And they were doing a kind of like a tattoo flash type of deal, but it was only for people who had donated to their shop after the shutdown, because they were out of work for like nearly a year. They were completely shut down. They couldn't do anything.
Protocol.
And they didn't really qualify for very much assistance to keep their doors open. So somebody had organized a GoFundMe, and a lot of their clients or people who just wanted to help these artists stay afloat donated to it, and as a thank you they did a flash free tattoo to everyone who donated. And I got this little tattoo, and it's really cute. It's a little butterfly on my arm, and it has a hand going up to the butterfly, so it's almost like the butterfly's landing on the hand. And I thought it was appropriate because I work in entomology and I grab a lot of butterflies. Actually, I grab a lot of moths, not butterflies. But
we'll have to take a picture of that.
Yeah,
and post it.
I wanted to take a picture because, like, this time of year, there's a certain moth that's flying around a lot that we're on the lookout for, and if I saw it, I wanted to like grab it and put it next to my tattoo and take a picture with it.
Oh, I really like it.
It's really cute.
It's very dainty.
It is. It's very delicate. It's really cute, and I'm very happy with it.
That's super fun.
Uh-huh.
Okay, sorry, I just was like, Wait, what? I wasn't sure if it was real or not.
Yeah, I was going to wait to tell you on the podcast, but then I totally forgot. But
That's funny.
yeah, I really like it. The artist who did it, her Instagram handle is The Female Gothic, and she does amazing work if you ever want to check out her page.
Okay, well, we'll post her
so
on our
cool.
stuff with your tattoo.
All right.
Sorry, continue.
So, yes, there were 9 patients that were completely bed-bound. They were on higher floors. They were all designated as 3s, which was lowest priority, or not priority, but like least to be evacuated.
Okay.
Last to be evacuated.
Okay.
And everybody else was moved to the 2nd floor.
Okay.
Okay? And it kind of reminds me, have you ever seen Pearl Harbor?
Mm-hmm.
Do you yes, you
Yeah.
did. After Pearl Harbor happens, when they have to write numbers in lipstick on the victims of the attack for a
Vaguely.
triage system, it's kind of like that. And it just, I don't know, there's something very eerie about that being done in modern day.
Assigning a number.
Yeah.
I feel like there was something with that, like with 9/11 as well.
Oh, I mean, yeah. I mean, it is a form of triage.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm sure
But
in a
that-
disaster like that,
Exactly. In that mass, like, of a disaster, like that amount of people, it is very eerie for sure.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So moving on. Once everybody's labeled, Poe directed the ones to the ER ramp area. So this is where boats were coming to take people away. They were at
Okay.
the point where they were able to, which is so weird. They're taking boats down these streets to evacuate people. And then the 2s were helped to this corridor that was leading to that machine room that I told you about earlier, where they like put people through this hole into the parking garage.
Mm-hmm.
And they were going to be sent out on the helicopter. And then the 3s were moved into a corner of the lobby where they were given like sips of clean water, and they were fanned to stay cool, and they were just trying to keep them comfortable and stable in this humidity and heat.
Does it say what was going on with any of these people? Like why they were in the hospital in the first place?
I have it a little bit later.
Okay, I'll wait.
There's a couple like specific patients that we'll talk about that
Okay.
had certain things going on, but a lot of them we don't really know. So
Okay.
I mean, there's so many people, it's hard to say.
All right.
Okay. So this wasn't an official like form of triage protocol that they were putting into place. This is kind of what Dr. Poe thought was best, because there really wasn't any emergency plans that were thought out for a situation as crazy as this.
Mm-hmm.
Still, the evacuation moved really slowly. The Coast Guard was focused on saving those people that were stranded on rooftops, and these patients were just kind of waiting, and they had limited resources. They were sweltering in this hot, humid condition, and it was just kind of trickling one by one, them being evacuated.
Okay.
So later that morning, 2 airboats driven by Mark and Sandra LeBlanc came up from the swamplands. So you know those big like fan
Oh yeah.
boats?
Uh-huh.
So I just imagine these like down home
Swampers.
swamp people pulling up, which is so badass. And they came out there to evacuate Mark's mother, Vera, who was a patient at the hospital recovering from colon cancer surgery.
Oh wow.
So he was like, screw it, I'm just going to go get her myself. And when Mark arrived, initially the nurses wouldn't even let him in the hospital to take his mother because she had been categorized as a 3.
Yeah,
so they're
she
like,
had freaking surgery.
right. So they're like, no, you can't take her. If you want to take people, take these other people who are ready to go.
Uh-huh.
And he's like, absolutely not. I came here to get my mom. And when they told him he couldn't do it, he just said, the hell I can't. And he picked her up and took her out to his boat. And they set off. And luckily, his, I don't know if it's wife, his girlfriend, his partner, Sandra, she was an EMT. So she like kind of had an idea of like medically how to care for her. And she noticed that she didn't have an IV or anything. Like she wasn't getting fluids or anything like that. And she thought that was really weird because she had a really hard time swallowing. So you would think in conditions like this where she's recovering from surgery, it's super hot, she can't swallow on her own,
There's no air conditioning.
that she's probably severely dehydrated and they're not giving her an IV. And when they asked her about that, like, why isn't she getting an IV? The doctors just responded that like this is all we can do. We're not in treatment mode. We're in survival mode.
Wow.
So keep that in mind when I tell you about things that happened later.
Okay.
So this woman who was also in the hospital, Angela, who wasn't a patient, she was actually the daughter of a patient, Welda McManus, overheard that these patients marked as 3s were going to be the last to evacuate. And she starts to panic because her mother is a 3 and her mother has a DNR, which was why she was a 3. And they just basically got told, hey, you're last to leave. So she's like, okay, how do I get out of this? How do I get out of being a number 3? So she goes to one of the nurses and says, hey, let's revoke this DNR, because the DNR that she had in place was from 10 years prior when she had an unrelated surgery. And she thought, if there's any sort of complications with this surgery, I don't want to be resuscitated. But that was a long time ago. And now she was recovering from something that was way less severe. And the DNR wasn't really something applicable at the time. And because of that, she was on the bottom of the list to go. So she wanted to get it revoked. The nurses and the doctors said, not at this time. We're in an emergency situation. We are not revoking DNRs. Sorry, you just have to deal with it.
So this person that is with a 3, they're coherent enough to understand that they're on the bottom of the list.
Oh, yeah. A lot of them. Not all of them. Some of them are completely unresponsive. But yeah, a lot of them.
That is panicky. Like oh, wow. That's terrible.
Yeah. So at this point, people are getting frustrated and they're getting irritated. And all of this happened, just to remind you, only 48 hours after Katrina had hit.
Yeah. It's insane how fast it's all moving.
It is absolutely insane. So that same afternoon, Dr. Ewing Cook, one of the guys who was armed outside of the hospital, he was standing guard near the ER ramp when several young men swam up, pushing a floating mattress with an emaciated woman on it.
What?
Like, she is just really sick. She needs help right away.
On like an air mattress.
I don't know if it was an air mattress or a mattress.
Oh, but it's okay.
But it's floating,
okay.
And they're standing on the side of it. They are using this thing as a makeshift gurney, and they are pushing her while they're swimming in sewage and filth and everything
to help
else
this woman
to get to the hospital, because, like, where else are you going to go in a situation like that?
Where'd this lady come from?
She was just one of the locals. So, but at this time, they were told no one's coming in. Mm-hmm. So the men begged for help, but under the orders from the administrator, they were told to keep everyone out, and they were barely able to even help the patients that they already had. So they were told to direct anyone who needed help to go 9 blocks south, like basically swim 9 blocks south to where there's dry land, and hopefully somebody can help you there. A few nurses noticed when this happened, and they couldn't just let her float away, and they begged the doctor to let her in and not turn her away, knowing that she was going to die if they tried to take her 9 blocks away.
Wow.
So finally they went ahead with it. They let her in. They let her husband come with her, but everybody else who was helping push that mattress, they're like, you cannot come in.
We don't have the resources to help you guys.
Don't have the resources, and you're probably contaminated with all kinds of stuff that could spread infection.
Oh, I didn't even think about that part. I didn't think, maybe obviously in situations like this, but I didn't think that doctors could refuse care. Isn't that like the Hippocratic Oath?
I think in a situation like this, they can shut down.
Okay.
Because if you don't have anything to help, what are you going to do?
I don't know.
That's what they had to do. They had to continue to send people away because more and more people kept showing up and
needed help.
Yeah, that needed help. And one of which was a mother with 2 small children, and she rowed up in a kayak situation, and she came up to the ER ramp and begged to come inside, but again they had to turn her away. And at this time, Dr. Bryant King absolutely lost it, and he broke down and started yelling and crying, and he's like, you cannot do this, you have to help people. But still they were refused, and they were told to just head south.
Who's making these calls? Who's this admin?
I don't remember.
And why are they? I guess because they're admin, they get to call the shots.
Yeah, and 2, you have to you don't know what the intentions are of these people coming in.
Right. Yeah. You have lots of drugs and food and probably clean water and firearms and stuff. And if bad people get in there, you're going to take over. But
yeah, so they were just at this point, they were trying to protect themselves as well.
totally. It just sucks.
So after Dr. King had his breakdown, Dr. Cook, the guy who was guarding the place, thought that Dr. King was just out of touch with reality and he really wasn't mentally stable anymore. And all of them were physically exhausted, mentally exhausted, and still the whole ordeal had like no end in sight. So Dr. Ewing Cook went back to the hospital to check on his patients, and his nurses still had some patients left on the 8th floor, some of the bedbound people who couldn't be moved.
Mm-hmm.
So he had to hike up all the stairs to get to the 8th floor, and once he got there, he had to check on a patient named Janie Burgess. And she had advanced uterine cancer and kidney failure. And she was being treated just for comfort at this point. And she was sedated to the point of unconsciousness. And because her disease had progressed so far, she was weighted down with like all kinds of fluids from the swelling.
Mm.
So she had swelled to about 350 pounds.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. And Dr. Cook, after just experiencing climbing up to check on her, was just exhausted. And he knew that he couldn't ask these nurses caring for her to help her down these flights of stairs. And then he also knew that there was a good chance, even if they did, she wouldn't be able to be evacuated through the machine room because she wouldn't have fit through
The little tunnel.
the hole into the parking structure. So, as a pulmonologist, Dr. Cook was familiar with this end-of-life care.
Wait, stop. Just define pulmonologist.
Like heart specialist,
Okay.
I think. No, that cardiologist, pulmonologist, blood specialist. I don't know. I don't even know why I threw that in. Because he's a doctor.
To sound really smart, and you didn't think I would ask you any questions about it.
He was familiar with this sort of situation, and he was also familiar with what it was like when you took people off of life support.
Oh, she's on life support.
No, she's not on life support, but he's familiar with what happens.
Okay.
And oftentimes when you take people off life support, they start
'cause
to
she'd be
gasp.
dead already. Sorry.
Yeah, they start to gasp for air a little bit.
Uh-huh.
And so what the doctors will do is they'll administer some morphine. And that way, when the family is there saying goodbye, they don't have to witness
The gasping.
the gasping. And then that patient doesn't have to experience that gasping and any sort of pain.
So it's like
It slows breathing.
it's like a kindness death
Yeah.
thing.
Sure. A kindness death thing.
I'm gonna trademark that.
Okay. So what he says to the nurses is, he asks them this question: do you mind just increasing the morphine and giving her enough until she goes? And then he scribbled pronounced dead on her chart and signed his name and left a blank space for them to fill out the time.
Okay.
You don't seem bothered by this
I'm
at all.
really not.
Really?
You know how we don't get political on this show?
Go for it.
We've already talked about guns. I'm all for mercy killings. 100%. I think that they should be done.
Wow.
Are you surprised?
A little bit, yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh no, I'm all for mercy killings. If someone is suffering and in pain and there is no chance of them getting better, why cause them to suffer for months or whatever?
Because who decides if they're truly suffering? And who decides how much pain is enough pain? And who decides if that pain is irreversible?
Well, she has kidney failure, advanced uterine cancer.
Uh-huh.
She is retaining fluids to the point of 350 pounds. There's a good chance she is miserable.
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't
Well,
know.
and I mean, I feel like that's something that should be put in place, kind of like a DNR. Obviously it's not legal. It's in many places. But like, hey, if I'm at this point, let me go.
Well,
Let
me continue.
I'm sure I'm going to get a lot of hate for that, but that's
Let
how
me go
I feel.
on. Okay, so back on the second floor, Dr. Cook meets up with Dr. Poe, I keep wanting to call her Poe. It's Dr. Poe. And two other doctors who are directing care, because remember, they're doing a whole triage, everybody's caring for everybody sort of situation. So patient cots almost filled this entire floor. That's how many people are down here. He looks to these patients, and some of them are just completely motionless. They're so miserable. They're covered in sweat. And he wondered how long it would possibly take to evacuate all of these people, and if it was even possible to do it, given that they keep getting these on again, off again notices of somebody's coming to help you.
Well, and there's more people coming on their door.
Right, exactly. There might be more and more coming through. So they keep getting these cancellations that helicopters can't come because they have other priorities, or the weather is not good. And it's like, oh, shit, how long are we going to be stuck
Or they're being
here?
fucking shot at.
Exactly. So some of the really desperately motivated hospital workers actually go out into the flooded streets where they saw some abandoned boats, and they hotwire them.
Hell yeah.
And try to get some people out that way. But you have to remember, you might get shot at in the process. So that's how desperate they are. Like, they are just, I mean, completely screwed.
They're just trying to save people, and that's all they're trying to do.
Sure.
Okay.
So then the following day, Thursday, September 1st, 72 hours after Katrina, the state police show up, and they inform the hospital staff that everybody has to be out by 5 p.m. because civil unrest in New Orleans has taken over, and they will no longer have any protection from the police.
How do they expect them to do that?
Exactly. So they were told after 5 p.m., nobody's coming to help you. Nobody's going to protect you.
Because is that when it gets dark or something?
I guess so. I don't know if it has a specific meaning, like based on cover of darkness or what, but they're just like, hey, we're abandoning ship. And
if you're not out,
you're on your own. Nobody's coming to save you.
Awesome.
So they finally had a fleet of private helicopters that were expected to get them out before this happened. And after they were dispatched, a lot of the staff like wasn't getting their hopes up. They're like, hey, we've heard this story before. We don't know if it's actually going to be true. And within the last couple hours of daylight, so to answer your question, within that last couple hours of daylight, the helicopters started to show up. So Dr. Cook and Dr. Poe at this point are completely overwhelmed. And they discussed what they're going to do with all of these category 3 patients who really couldn't be evacuated very easily on their own. Not on their own at all. And they know that everybody is completely sleep deprived and exhausted. And they had this task of attempting to carry at least 9 patients who are bedbound through multiple floors to get them out.
I don't even know how that would happen, because like on a gurney, you know, these people are in beds, and usually the beds have wheels. Are they gonna try and like bump down 8 flights of stairs?
I don't.
Or would they put him in like a satchel? What is that called?
I don't know what you're trying to, like in a bag?
No, not like a like you carry a corner of a sheet and I carry a corner of a sheet.
No, I'm thinking that they would be using backboards like they do like the fire department.
Okay,
so I would think that like you would lift up the sheets, move them onto this backboard, strap them onto the backboard, and then there's handles on that, and you get on all corners and carry them down.
But 8 flights of stairs, 9 patients,
sleep deprivation, exhaustion,
and not that many staff.
Right.
Yeah, that's a lot of work.
Yeah, and they were worried about what they would do. And so this is a direct quote because I don't want to screw this part up. So it says, Cook said he told Poe how to administer a combination of morphine and benzodiazepine sedative. The effect, he said, was that the patients would go to sleep and die.
All of them?
He explained that it cuts down your respiration so that you gradually stop breathing and go out. And he said that he believed that Poe understood that he was telling her how to achieve this. He said that he viewed this as a way to ease the patients out of a terrible situation. So, Mercy Killer supporter Rosa, how do you feel about that?
I mean, with the one lady, I'm on board. I would want to know What is happening with these other patients?
So how sick do you have to be for it to be okay to kill you?
Me?
Or like anyone?
I don't know. And I mean, again, it's only been, 3 days?
Yeah.
So that's not a ton of time. Yeah, that makes it a little bit more difficult. I feel like a really bad person for saying that. But I've put so many dogs to sleep or animals to sleep. And I know.
Jesus, that makes you sound like a serial killer.
Well, I've had a lot of pets in my life. And I know that was the best decision for them at the time because they were suffering and they were, in pain or just, quality of life wasn't there. And and I know, again, I'm going to get hate messages for comparing people to animals, but if you compare a person to an animal and you say like, okay, quality of life right now isn't good and it's not going to get better anytime soon.
But notice like what you said right there. You said quality of life right now. So if these patients were in a hospital that was functioning,
would they be in a better situation?
Yeah.
Possibly.
Definitely.
Well, better than it was, yeah. But are they in pain? Are they suffering?
I mean, no, probably not, because they do have plenty of morphine. I don't know.
Okay.
So let me give you a different perspective.
I want to know if they're coherent.
I'll get to that.
Oh, fuck. Okay.
Okay. So Teresa Mendez, she was the executive nurse who cared for a lot of the patients who remained on these upper floors, and she had worked overnight helping with the evacuations on the lower floor. So they were kind of like trading shifts. And when she had returned to the upper floor, she noticed that several of her patients were now unconscious. Some of them were frothing at the mouth and breathing irregularly.
Okay, yeah, see? No, that's not okay.
Even though when she left, she only gave them a small dose of morphine as a sedative just for comfort because they didn't really need much else.
So did someone else dose them?
That's what she was thinking.
Oh.
So then Dr. Poe informed her that her patients would most likely not survive this evacuation and they had been given additional morphine to ease their pain. Mendez asked if her patients were being singled out because she kind of figured out like this wasn't something I think was directly said, probably to cover their ass. Mm-hmm. But I think she figured out, holy shit, you just dosed my patients to death. Like you just killed all of my patients. And she asked, like, are my patients being singled out because they're the ones that are the most difficult to move? And Dr. Poe said, no, there's no telling how far this needs to go.
Oh, awesome. So it's going to move down to 2s and then he's a bit much. She's a bit much.
Dr. Anna.
Okay.
Poe. Then Dr. Muldrick, who worked with Anna Poe, informed the staff that the plan was not to leave any living patients behind. Although he never officially used the word euthanized, Dr. Poe understood that they were going to help the patients that were not going to make it out. If that makes sense.
Help them by putting them to sleep.
Basically.
Again, and I'm going to probably say this a few more times, I know it feels like forever, but it's only been 3 days.
Yeah. I think this is day 4 at this point.
Okay, but
yeah, because I think,
I mean, and maybe that's just they feel absolutely hopeless and just beaten down at this point, which I can get, lack of sleep, and they're just, exhausted. So maybe they're not thinking, rationally. But I mean, they're gonna get help, right? Someone's going to come and help you. But think about
how many times, from the very beginning, they weren't even concerned about the power because they figured they would be out in a couple hours.
So they've just been given false hope so many times.
Again and again and again.
Huh. Okay. I don't know. I just feel like even if you're lost in the wilderness and, you think you're gonna be okay.
But I think that's a false sense of security that a lot of people have in our society. Just Western civilization. We have this sense of security that somebody's going to help you. There's always somebody who's going to help. And that's not always the case.
So they just think they're not going to get help now.
Possibly. Or they're into survival mode where it's like, hey, I need to get out and I'm not sticking around and risking my life for yours. Because if you think like, okay, these state police officers told us if we're not out by 5, nobody's coming to save us.
Right.
So we either leave these people behind and let them suffer, we stay with them and potentially die ourselves, or we put them out of their misery. So I think that's and it seems irrational to us after only a couple days, but you have to take in consideration everything that's fallen down around them, and they're sleep deprived, they're overworked, they have, the fear of people coming in and killing them.
Yeah, there's a lot of shit going on.
Yeah. Okay, so what was I saying?
I don't even know.
All right, so some of these nurses were aware of what was going on, like how these people were being basically put to sleep.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of them weren't. So some of them were in the know, and some of the doctors were in the know, and some of them weren't.
And what were their feelings? Were some of them okay with it? Were some of them like super anti?
That's what I'm going to get to. So there's a patient, Mr. Emmett Everett, who was a 380-pound man who was very aware of his surroundings. And on the day that he was supposed to evacuate, just like everybody else, this mass evacuation day, he got up, he made himself breakfast, he talked to his nurse, Andre Germelian.
Sure.
Nurse Andre.
There you go.
And he said to him, "So, we ready to rock and roll?" And he was only in the hospital because he was scheduled to have a colostomy surgery. So he kept having like chronic bowel obstructions.
Okay.
So I guess they're going to put in a colostomy bag. I think that's what that means.
Sure.
But on the grand scheme of things, like not a super serious surgery, I wouldn't think. I mean, I don't know. I'm not a doctor, but it doesn't seem like it was a life
or death
situation.
Right.
Yeah. But he had a DNR. And Andre later stated that on the day of the evacuation, a female physician came into the room who he wasn't aware of. He didn't know who she was, and pulled him aside and said, "You need to let Mr. Everett know that he's too big to move and he will be left behind. I'm going to give him something to relax while you explain the situation."
What the fuck? Wait, why? He was bedridden?
No, he was just too big.
Why couldn't he walk down the stairs?
He was, I think, in a wheelchair too.
Okay.
Did I say that wrong? I said he got up and made breakfast. I mean, you could still get up and make breakfast in a wheelchair.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. So, I cut this story a lot, but.
So he wasn't able to walk.
Right.
But he wasn't bedridden.
Right.
But he couldn't move his legs,
I guess,
to walk downstairs.
Right.
Okay.
So.
I don't like where this is going.
The nurse Andre, when he hears her say this, he like realizes what she's planning on doing, and he freaks out. I mean, he loved this patient.
Oh,
They're spending 3 whole days together. Like, he's caring for him. He has this amazing sense of humor. He has a family. Was this man who was like hardworking his whole life. And he just loses it. And he starts crying and shaking in the hallway. And this other nurse walks by, Nurse Gina Isbell, and she saw his reaction and she pulled him into an empty room and it's like, "What's going on? Is she doing something to her patients?" And he told her, yes, they aren't going to leave. They're both completely drained and upset, and they were crying together, and they prayed that help would come before all of these patients were killed.
Yeah, I don't like that.
Yeah.
And I don't think I would, I want to say that, but I don't think I would allow that to happen.
Yeah.
I think I would.
You would fight it?
Oh, absolutely.
Kind of like Dr. King, I mentioned earlier, how he was yelling, like, you can't keep turning people away.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure he wasn't in the know of what was going on, because it sounds like he would have been somebody who prevented this from happening.
Again, with that one patient that was just not awake and who knows what they were feeling and stuff, that I could see taking, the Dr. Death way of dealing with her. But this one dude who's just like happy, joking, no, that's not okay.
No, not at all. And like I said, a lot of people didn't know what was going on. And later, when they're questioned about this, because obviously word got out what happened, a lot of them said it didn't matter how tired and just overworked and overwhelmed they were, they would have found a way to get them evacuated.
When you choose the profession of like a nurse or a doctor, that's your goal, is to help people. Like you would think.
Yeah.
So to just quit doing that all of a sudden is a little strange.
Yeah, but at the same time, you never know how you're going to respond in a situation like that. There's no way of truly testing that out.
Or preparing.
Right. And when you take a position as a doctor or a nurse, you might not ever, like, you're not signing up to go to war.
No. You're going to work in an air-conditioned elevator working hospital.
Yeah, I don't think anybody ever expects to be in a situation like this. So Nurse Gina Isbell, she finds her patient Alice Hutzler, a 90-year-old woman who came in for treatment for bed sores and pneumonia. Isbell fondly called her Miss Alice and she had told her daughter that she was going to take the best care of her mother, but sadly, she was also euthanized.
So they killed the other man as well, the Everett, and this 90-year-old lady?
And this 90-year-old. And then remember I mentioned earlier the daughter of the patient, her name was Angela, and patient Welda McManus, who tried to rescind the DNR. She had a blood infection, and she was sitting with her mother. Angela was sitting with her mother when Dr. Poe came up and told her mother, I'm going to give you something to help you feel better. And moments later, she had passed as well.
Shut up.
Another patient, Rose Savia. I'm not sure. I'm probably not saying that right. She was a woman with acute bronchitis, and the nurses held her hands while she received an injection. And again, Dr. Poe said, I'm going to give you something to make you feel better.
Oh, yeah. No, she's losing it.
So according to memorial workers on the second floor, about a dozen patients who were designated as threes remained in the lobby by the ATM. Other memorial patients were evacuated with the help of volunteers and medical staff, including Bryant King, Dr. Bryant King. So at the time, they didn't think much of that because they were trying to help everybody relax before this evacuation, and patients were hot and uncomfortable, and a few of them might be terminally ill, and it was just a way a lot of staff thought, okay, they're just trying to get them as chill as possible for this move.
Yeah, if a doctor comes and says, hey, I'm going to make you feel better, you'd be like, oh, okay, cool, thanks.
Right. So it wasn't until later that a lot of them realized that this is actually mercy killing that was going on.
How many people have been murdered?
Well, we know at least the 9 that were upstairs, and then we heard later on that there was more downstairs. So let me get to the point where I tell you how many bodies were found.
So she's moved on to the number 2s. Is that correct?
No, these are 3s that are downstairs.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so before I do that, I just do have like this quote from the original book just to kind of describe what was going on. And I put this in here for some reason, and I don't really remember why or what it says. So I'm just going to read it to you.
Oh,
okay?
Sounds great.
Okay. He says that it took less than a minute for the man to die and that he didn't suffer. This is totally against every fiber in my body, the nurse told me. But he also knew that this was the right thing to do. We were abandoned by the government. We were abandoned by Tennant, and clearly nobody was here to take care of these people during their dying moments, he added. I did what I had to do, and I did what I would have wanted done to me if the roles were reversed.
But it wasn't their dying moments. That quote is a lie. I mean, maybe he's referring to some of the patients, but not all of them.
Not
it doesn't sound like.
Everett, no.
Right. So it's not their dying moments.
Yeah, I don't know. I think that's where it gets into like a really sticky situation, and that's where I don't know. I keep going back and forth. So Both the nurses and doctors recall that they saw Dr. Poe and the other nurses cover the bodies of the dead and then carry them to the chapel, completely filling it.
Wait, where the hell's the chapel?
I don't know.
Because
if they could carry them
carrying,
to the chapel,
yeah,
then they could carry them to be evacuated.
Yep.
I don't know. That's a really good point. Once the chapel was full, the remaining bodies were wrapped in sheets and placed on the floor in the corridor nearby the room. It was very respectful, the nurses said. It's not like you would think. So that's the quote from the book. So you kind of have an idea of how it went down.
Okay, that just pissed me off.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I'm with you. Like, if it's so bad and everybody's so exhausted that they can't even, like, carry somebody out, then I would think that it's so bad that you can't, like, take them out of their room.
No.
I don't know.
You respectfully cover them up, but no, we're not carrying people. Nope. Mm-mm.
Okay. So now we're on to Sunday, September 11th, and this is 13 days after the storm hit.
Yikes.
So the hospital itself, no, they're not at the hospital anymore. Or did you think, yikes, like they were still there?
Yeah.
Oh, no. So all of this went down in 5 days.
Okay.
The 5th day, that was the last day to get everybody who was still alive out.
So, and that happened. Okay.
Yeah. There was one man, I don't know if I included it because the story got so long, who was almost left for dead. They literally thought he was dead and left him there. And then I guess somebody coming in to clear the building was like, we still have a live person here.
Well, he's
and
probably
got him out.
pretty lucky that they thought he was dead.
He's extremely lucky. Yeah, he's extremely lucky because they probably would have euthanized him.
Wow.
So 13 days later, September 11th, 2005, mortuary workers were sent out to recover do you want to guess how many?
How many that they killed?
Well, this is a combination of people who were euthanized and people who died just
naturally.
Because, yeah.
27.
45.
Ooh.
Yeah. Recovered the 45 decomposing bodies from Memorial Medical Center. The next day, the Louisiana Attorney General opened investigations into the hospital and nursing homes near the area that were hit by Hurricane Katrina.
So were nursing homes doing the same thing?
Yes.
Wow.
At least that was presumed at this time. I don't know what came of charges filed against other medical facilities. I only know what happened here.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, there was investigations into that as well.
Is it ironic that it's Mercy Hospital?
It's not Mercy Hospital. It's Memorial Hospital.
Oh.
But that would have been.
I just named it. Okay.
So the Justice Department started receiving phone calls with allegations of patients being abandoned and euthanized. And I'm not, all of these facilities, not just Memorial as well, or singularly. Why can't I talk today?
It's okay.
Not good at talking. So records showed that more than half of the 41 bodies from Memorial Hospital analyzed by lab testing found high levels of morphine and midazolam, which is that drug that I mentioned earlier.
Uh-huh.
This is just another name for it. So
Okay.
a sedative and basically something that arrests your breathing.
Okay. I think that's like what I'm blanking on her name. I remember Teets, but the wife injected her husband with before she started the fire.
Yeah.
I feel like that's a very similar thing.
Yeah, and apparently you're not supposed to mix these drugs.
Okay.
So if they're being mixed like that, it's
Gonna kill you.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So the drug concentrations that were found on these patients, the medical examiner said, quote, stuck out like a sore thumb. So there was no question
If they were overdosed.
Right. He knew immediately. He's like, this is obvious. More than 7 times the maximum dose was found on a few patients. 7 times.
Mm-hmm.
The prosecution of New Orleans Parish typically requires a coroner's medical determination of homicide, and that's what happened, to determine the fault and responsibility legally.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense? Want me to say that again?
I mean, you can if you want to.
Okay. So prosecution of New Orleans Parish typically requires a coroner's medical determination of homicide, that a death was caused by the actions of another human without regard or fault or legal responsibility.
Okay.
So does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's someone else's
This is
fault.
clearly somebody's been shot. Somebody's been stabbed. Somebody,
Right.
this is homicide. So because of these findings, the district attorney's office prepared a 10-count bill of indictment against Dr. Poe, and the grand jury.
10 count meaning 10 people?
I'm not sure. I believe so.
Okay.
Yeah. So that was 10 counts for the grand jury to consider, and one of these counts was considered second-degree murder, and that was in the case of Emmett Everett.
Oh, okay.
Right.
Wait, why is that one second degree versus the others?
So the others were actually lesser, and it was conspiracy to commit second-degree murder.
What?
Right. And I'm not exactly sure. I think it might have been possibly the statement by the nurse that was caring for Emmett Everett, because he was so together and with it. And possibly he might have not been on any of those drugs at all. So if you look at the other cases where these patients may have been completely out of it and may have already been on morphine, then maybe it was more difficult to charge her with murder for those patients than this particular patient.
So there was obviously the first one you told us about, like the lady that swelled up. And then
But that wasn't even Dr. Poe. Poe.
Poe.
You're going to have to do a lot of editing.
It's okay. Wait, who was that one? Who killed her?
The nurses.
But weren't they instructed to?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So, and then there was the 90-year-old who had pneumonia.
Right. I don't have answers to these questions.
I know.
I don't know why some of them were, other than Emmett was way more together than the others.
Okay. All right. I don't like that. I don't agree with that, but keep going.
Okay, so of course you have a lot of people who were against her. I mean, initially these people were deemed heroes because they were the healthcare providers that stayed behind during this storm. But yeah, it was a very conflicted time because you're questioning the ethics of somebody who is a doctor, is supposed to know what's best for the patients. And one former nurse says that he doesn't know whether or not for certain euthanasia was used, but he said if it had, he wonders what the doctors or nurses could have been thinking. How can you say that euthanasia is better than evacuation? He asked. If there's vital signs, he said, let them go. Let God make that decision. So that's kind of his feelings on it. Like if that patient ends up dying during evacuation, then so be it. But you don't get to make that call. So there's a lot of conflicts going back and forth. So ultimately, Dr. Poe and 2 nurses were charged. So she had 2 nurses who were kind of administering the medications with her. And those are the people that they could like officially file charges on. There's speculations of others like Dr. Cook, but it was just too difficult for the district attorney to establish a case against him. So they just focused on those 3.
I feel like people that knew that she was doing this should have had charges pressed as well.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think it'd be very, very difficult to prove.
Yeah.
So ultimately, what would you think if you were on the jury, just based on the little bit of information I gave you? How would you decide?
Well, remember how I said I'm like all for mercy killings? I still think I am. I really do. But I feel like those people should have a say. You know, if they want to go peacefully and, you know, if they feel it's their time.
Yeah, kind of like, what was his name? Dr. Death, Dr. Kevorkian?
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, but he didn't do it unless the person consented.
And he as far as I know, he had like full on almost like therapy sessions with those people before he injected them.
Yeah.
People that were having no clue that this was going to happen and that probably could have survived otherwise, I think it's murder, 100%.
Yeah. So I guess at this point, if you're going by the letter of the law, you would say
I would
guilty.
Absolutely.
Okay. Well, apparently they brought on a better case than I did because the grand jury did not indict Dr. Poe of any of the charges. She was free to go.
No
Yeah.
way.
I guess they really took into consideration circumstances and what I guess when you look at a case like this, you have to take into consideration what would an average person do, I guess. Like I've heard that being presented in cases before. Like it's like, okay, if you put yourself in that situation, what would you have done?
I wouldn't have started killing nice people.
You said earlier you would.
Well, I mean, that person wasn't doing well.
Well, that's not your decision to make. But no, she was not convicted of anything. She went on to continue to practice medicine, and she also now speaks for a lot of panels discussing the ethics of care in circumstances such as hurricanes and hospital shutdowns where you do have to make decisions that you wouldn't normally make, and kind of taking a look at the psychology of what goes down and what can you expect of a person when you're put in such a high stress situation, and how do you plan ahead for care of patients.
Does she regret it, or does she think she did right?
She doesn't really talk specifically about a lot of it, at least from what I read. She kind of talks around it.
Because 5 days.
Yeah.
People can survive without food for 5 days. Yes, they need water, but they can survive, especially if you're 380 pounds. I mean,
I don't know. It's hard. I don't think
murdered that man.
Anybody can really.
I can. I am the judge and jury on
You
her.
keep going back and forth. I think we both keep going back and forth.
That's the thing. No, if it would have been just that first person, you tricked me is what happened. You tricked me. That was obviously dying. She was dying.
Mm-hmm.
But Emmett was not.
But, okay, look at it this way. That first person who may have been dying, she was not suffering. She was sedated. She had morphine drip going on. She may have had an opportunity later on to say goodbye to her family, and that was taken away from her. And what do you say to the family? Oh, sorry, she was too much of an inconvenience. She was probably going to die eventually anyway.
But did she have fluids? Because like you said, that one lady, the mom, they didn't have her hooked up to an IV. So this lady, if she wasn't being given fluids, she would have died because of lack of, water.
I don't know. I don't
like this.
Okay, I do have one more quote. Again, I don't remember why I put this quote in here, but apparently I thought it was important when I wrote this story.
I bet it's super important.
So let me just read it to you.
Okay.
So Dr. Poe participated in a panel on the moral and ethical issues that could arise if standards of care were altered in a disaster. At one point, one of the panelists, Father John F. Tuhey, Regional Director of the Province Center of Healthcare Ethics in Portland, Oregon, said that there are dangers whenever rules are set that would deny or remove certain groups of patients from access to life-saving resources. The implication was that if people outside the medical community don't know what the rules are or feel excluded from the process of making them or don't understand why people receive essential care, and some don't, their confidence in people who care for them risks being eroded. As bad as disasters are, he said, even worse is survivors who don't trust each other. So what do you think about that?
I feel like it's what we've been saying the whole time. Like, if people, you can't know unless you've been in that situation.
Yeah. And then at the same time, which I think is what he's trying to say, is if you allow things like this to happen in a disaster situation, you no longer have trust in the system because somebody might decide, oh, you know what? Rosa, who had a broken leg, she was on the verge of death anyway.
Well,
So
yeah,
I'm
she
just
can't
gonna
walk
put
down
her,
the stairs by
right.
herself.
Like if you allow that leniency in the rules, then you also allow the lack of trust.
Mm-hmm. Well, and again, like the trust with the doctor saying, oh, I'm going to give you something to make you feel better. You're supposed to be trusting that person that's telling you that. And if that person is instead is saying, oh, here, let me give you something to make you feel better, and injects you with a lethal dosage, but you just stood there and held out your arm for them, well, you trusted them.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
But I still believe in mercy killings.
But who gets to decide?
You do.
Okay. Only if you get to decide.
Uh-huh. You do.
Okay.
Like Kevorkian status.
Well, that was my story. That's the end of the 5 days at Memorial Hospital. I highly recommend the book. I mean,
Give the book another plug.
it's called 5 Days at Memorial. It's by Sherry Fink, and it's really long, but it's really good. And yeah, I'm sorry this wasn't more fun. Normally we have an opportunity to kind of chit chat and joke around, but I had a ton of information to jam down your throats. So
Your gullet.
yeah. Anything else?
Well, next week, it's my turn to give a story.
Okay.
And you know, we normally pull from the basket of locations. I have another listener request.
Ooh.
Or suggestion, I should say.
I love when the listeners do the work for us.
Well, I think sometimes, though, the listeners create a lot of work for us because yours was a listener suggestion and it was a lot of work. It's a big, big, big story. Mine is a big, big, big story.
Okay.
And I'm going to ruin a lot of childhood.
Oh, fun. I love ruining
Hopes
ruining
and
childhood.
dreams. But yeah.
My favorite.
So do you want to hear some last thoughts and shots? Or shots and thoughts?
Yes, please.
Okay, hang on.
Let's lighten the mood.
All right. Are you ready for my thoughts and shots?
Tell me.
2 truths and a lie. You ready?
Ready.
They're all about Dr. Kevorkian.
Ooh. Did you ever watch that movie that they made about him?
No, I didn't even know there was one. I
Yeah.
mean, I assumed there was, but no.
It's kind of, I don't know why I remember this, but it was the very first movie that I watched in my apartment when I moved away to college.
Uh-huh.
And I got it from the Red Box at like the local Vons.
Yes.
And it was really good, but that was probably 10 years ago now.
At least.
And it was a relatively new movie because Redbox had new movies.
Huh.
But yeah, it was interesting.
Do you remember what it was called?
Dr. K, or maybe it was called Kevorkian. Or
Sure, we could look it up.
yeah, something like that. Dr. Death, I don't know, something like that.
Okay.
One of those very different sounding 3 titles.
Yeah,
But
sure. Yeah, great. Okay, you ready?
Ready.
Okay, so 2 truths and a lie. Ready?
Ready.
Dr. Kevorkian.
Ready.
He taught himself Japanese and German while in high school during World War II, and he also played the flute and released an album.
That's a lot of things.
Okay. That's the first one.
In high school?
Yes.
Oh, wow.
Yes. He gave himself an injection when he was released from prison, and he was like super sick when he was released from prison, and so he gave himself assisted suicide.
Wait,
He
died?
Yeah, he's dead.
No, but like he killed. Okay, no, but your scenario is he killed himself.
Correct.
I don't remember that happening in the movie.
He like assisted suicide on himself.
Okay.
Or he built the suicide machine for $30.
Suicide machine.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna say, God, but $30 is specific. I believe the first one. I think that one's true.
The languages in the album. The
Yeah.
flute album.
I don't remember him killing himself in the movie,
Okay.
but I also don't remember him creating a suicide machine. Okay, I'm gonna go with the second one. I don't know. I'm just guessing.
Second one, he killed himself with the suicide machine, or gave himself an injection and killed himself.
Yeah.
That that would be correct.
Oh, really? Okay.
Mm-hmm. So the Mercitron is what he called his suicide machine. He did build it for $30. It consisted of bottles, chemicals, and tubing to inject deadly drugs.
Okay.
And then,
but that's something that a medical person would administer, right? It's not like, oh, buy it out of this catalog and it can be.
Yeah, he built this one. And actually, the medical professionals never even injected the patients. They were given a trigger button to push the button that would kill themselves. Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's okay. That makes sense because I can understand kind of like when executions take place.
Mm-hmm.
Like back when I don't
a shooting
firing,
squad.
Yeah, a firing squad, firing line. They would have multiple people shooting, so no one really knew exactly
whose bullet did it.
Right.
Well, and this is then he couldn't. In his mind, he thought he couldn't be convicted of murder because he wasn't the one pushing the button.
But it's still assisted suicide, which is still illegal.
Mm-hmm. But that was his thought process.
Okay.
On it. He was released from prison after, I don't know, I don't know how long he served, but he was sentenced to 10 to 25 years. But when he was released, he just died, I think in 2011. But I don't know what from. So he did not kill himself.
Okay. Yeah.
But he, a quote from him, it says, quote, "No, remember, I did not advocate assisted suicide. I only advocated that a person should have the right to have an option if he or she, in sound mind, needed and desired it while in irremediable pain and suffering and terminal."
We should do a story on him.
Would be interesting. Those weren't really funny, silly,
No.
less thoughts shots, but I was just thinking a lot of Kevorkian during your story.
Yeah.
So.
Well, if you're still listening out there, go make yourself a tropical rum drink
and enjoy it.
Yeah, that might make you feel a little bit better. This is pretty depressing.
This is a dark story for sure.
Yeah.
Very, very doom and gloom.
I hope it was at least interesting.
I thought it was very interesting.
All right.
Well, next week I will have another listener request for you. And if you, listener, if you're still listening, want to send us a message or a story idea, go ahead and send it to theripplepodcast@gmail.com or DM us on Instagram @theripplepod or on Facebook, The Ripple Podcast.
I don't know. Find one of just Google us.
And you'll find a way to get us a message. Oh, and while you're Googling us, why don't you rate us and review us on iTunes? Because that would be super cool. All right, everyone, don't forget to be a fountain.
And not a Jade.
Bye.
Bye.